Well, hello and welcome to the Red Mountain Community Church podcast, where you can hear conversations with the people of Red Mountain Community Church as we pursue Jesus together. Each episode highlights what God is doing in someone's life or a specific theme in light of what God has revealed in the Bible. I'm Peter Franson, one of the elders and your fellow seat warmer here at Red Mountain Community Church. My co-host today is none other than Preston Hancock, our pastor of leadership and missions, and also one of the elders. Thanks for doing this again with me, Preston.
Absolutely.
Now, you've got those co-titles of like you're a pastor here, but you're also one of the elders. So I'm curious a little bit about, well, I'm not curious because I know, but on behalf of the people listening,
Yeah.
I am curious.
Let's say I was curious.
Yeah. Describe just a little bit about like how that dynamic plays out when, because as elders and I've seen you guys in my provisional time as well, talk about pastoral roles and different pastor things, going on, and decisions that need to be made regarding, in particular, as we were reformulating what your role was going to be in this new title, So, how do we keep things above board when we're talking about, well, we got to talk about pay or some other thing that, you got to be it's got to be a weird position if you're like, well, we're talking about my job now, and so how do you navigate both of those roles?
Well, since you bring up, because our elder board is broken up in subgroups, there's certain subgroups that handle certain elements, and so we have an administrative subgroup that oversees anything that I might put forward, or Missy now as the pastor of administration would put forward in terms of budgets and salaries and that sort of thing. And so how that would work for me, because I'm both a contributor and a recipient, in that sense. Yeah. So I don't weigh in on anything related to me or my role. Mm-hmm. And if need be, I would leave the room. Yeah. So far, it hasn't been necessary for me to leave the room, but I never put myself forward for race. I just when it comes to the budgets, I would look at everybody else's position, and I could make recommendations there, and that's where the conversation ends. And so if nobody brings up my opinion, then that is a man can only receive what is given him from heaven. That's what, so the Lord has to direct that, and that comes with everything in our elder deliberations. I contribute, as you've seen, full on. I offer my opinions as an elder. Yeah. At the same time, when a decision gets made, they'll go, Preston, we need you to. Yeah. And at that point, I'm a pastor, and I'm getting my marching orders. In that sense. And so, and that's where it's important that I hear from the group collectively, and so that it's clear. Kyle is my direct line as the lead pastor. But the elders, oversee him and me. Yeah. And so, does that help make it clear, in that sense?
Yeah. And I so appreciate just seeing over the last year and a half how you very humbly and responsibly walk that line. And that's true of like a guy like Pete Crimmins as well, whose wife has now stepped into a pastoral role. And during the formulation of her position as well, there was times where he would kind of opt out and not be there for a meeting, and kind of like it was understood, why he was doing that. And so I really appreciate the responsibility and the humility and the care of guys like you and Pete in those kinds of situations. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I thought it would be a moment to kind of highlight that since you're here. Yeah, but now we get to something that's much more goofy. The irresistible question, of course, must be answered. Okay. And the question this time is, what is the best prank you've either experienced or planned?
Okay, so what comes to mind is when I was training to be a missionary, we lived for 4 months on this campus of my mission organization, International Teams. And there were so many singles at that time. There was a guy's house and a girl's house. Okay. And so inevitably pranks arose. Okay. Things started happening. And things started elevating and getting out of hand a little bit. And I'm trying to remember, I can't remember what we led off with, but the girls then because it was fall in Chicago, so they put leaves all in our bed and crunched them up. And it just started escalating. Yeah. So then the guys are like, oh, we really got to get them back. What do we do? And then a verse came to my mind of in Romans, and I believe it is Romans 12, do good to your enemies and bless those who persecute. And in so doing, you will heap burning coals upon their head.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, we're going to do Operation Burning Coals. And we bought them roses.
Oh.
And we just left them in their rooms, and they went berserk. They went nuts. What are you doing? They're planning something serious. No, we're just giving you roses. No, and then they were just freaking out because they just thought we were setting them up for something.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we just let them stew on it for a couple of days.
Wow.
And we just said, no, we're just giving you flowers. And so that was, and it was great.
That's freaking brilliant.
And it actually put an end to the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing.
For sure.
And we gave them flowers.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I wish I would have had the wisdom to do something like that.
I don't know if it was wisdom. There was a part of me that was like, they're gonna stew on this. They're gonna what's coming next? But yeah, I'll pretend like it was noble.
Yeah. Best prank you've either experienced or planned. I've only committed and experienced bad pranks. I, in college, was a big fan for a little while there of the comedian Andy Kaufman. Are you familiar with this guy?
Yeah.
So
the old school.
Yeah. He was on Taxi.
Yeah, Lotka Gravis. Yeah.
And Jim Carrey played him in the movie about him and stuff like that. And a lot of his comedy was about like deep trolling people before trolling was a thing. Like he would have whole comedy, like he had a comedy routine where he got up and he read The Great Gatsby. That's it. He didn't do anything else.
Right.
He didn't read it in a silly way. He read it in a very serious kind of stuffy kind of way. And he never broke. And he would, and people would laugh at first, but then they would like start getting ticked off and throwing stuff at him. They would just leave, you know. I mean, he really was just messing with people on a really deep level. And that's what I kind of like, I think I glommed onto that kind of thing in college.
Right.
And with my video camera, just messing with classmates and stuff. And I so regret that. I can't tell you how much I regret that. I was really enjoying it at the time, but like that totally was sabotaging my witness for Christ in their lives, you know, to be this person that they, you know, were wondering, oh no, what's he going to do today? You know, because I always loved getting reactions out of people.
Okay.
And that and I also like, I can dish it out, but I can't take it. I really dislike pranks, especially like scare pranks of any kind.
Yeah.
If you want to set back our relationship by a few years, then do a prank that's specifically designed to scare me. And if it involves insects, then we're done. You and I are done.
Okay. Noted.
But like the closest thing I will say that wasn't exactly a prank that I willingly participated in was this stool that at the church and the youth ministry built called El Diablo.
Oh, I remember.
And it's been a long time since on the podcast I mentioned this, but like this was, I was on staff. I can't remember if I was the worship pastor, if I was working under Mickey, but Kyle was, I think Kyle Fox was the intern or something at that point. And I just remember it was Kyle Fox, Tony Nave.
Tony Nave built the thing.
Yeah, he built it. Okay. Yeah. And they had it in the admin building, and they were just telling me about this thing. And I was like, oh. And I can't remember if it was my idea to give it a try or their idea for me to give it a try. But I knew what it was. I just didn't know how shocking it was going to be. It was basically some kind of like, they put a battery on the bottom of this seat, and it was remote control.
I think it was a car battery.
A car battery. I would believe it.
Yes.
It was like... I've never been bit in the butt by a rattlesnake, but that has to be what it felt like.
Oh, totally.
Because it was a two-pronged attack.
Well, there was like
on my rear.
There was a stool with a mesh wire, a metal mesh top.
Yes.
With the car battery attached to that.
Yeah. And so you just sat on it with this little metal plate there or whatever, and then they activate, and oh my gosh, I couldn't believe, like, I think I ran to a bathroom. I was like, there has to be some scars or bruising or something. There was nothing. We can all picture that, I guess, now. Thank you for that, Pater. All right, we got to move on. As a reminder, you can message us on Instagram or Facebook with suggestions. Bad, Pater, bad. Message us on Instagram or Facebook with suggestions for fun things that we could do or talk about. So if you didn't want to, imagine me going to the bathroom and checking myself, that is on you. You could have made some kind of suggestion that would steer us in a better direction than the dark, dark place that I took us all just now. Anyway, So yeah, your suggestions could really help things be better before the interview. But we are going to move things along right now. Just a little while ago, Preston and I spent some time talking with Russ Ortiz about his journey to faith and just how that mixed in with his role as a Major League Baseball player. Even if you are not a sports fan, I'm not a sports fan, and there is stuff here very relevant to anybody that is a believer. So I encourage you to stick around and give it a listen. Here's that conversation now. Well, Russ, thanks so much again for coming in and doing this and sitting in front of the microphone. As we were just talking before we started recording, you've had some experience kind of sharing your story and stuff. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be a huge stretch for you, but still, I appreciate you giving up some time for this. Can you, just as we get started, give me a snapshot of your current stage of life? Just kind of, I don't know, work, family, kids, anything you think is relevant.
Yeah, well, currently, I tell my wife, I'm in the stage of living my best life. And she laughs because she knows that is mainly about golf. So right now, I'm just being available for whatever, family, whatever God has for me, and just recreation, fun, hanging out with friends, stuff like that. So, I've been retired from baseball for 14 years now. And so I would say 10, 11 of those, I was doing something, or, busy with something.
Okay.
And so these last couple years, I was just like, I'm not doing anything and just being available. And so that's why so I love it. I absolutely love it. Still plenty busy, still plenty to do. But it's just been a real treat and blessing to be able to do something like that. Just say, like, I'm not doing anything and just hanging out and just being available for whatever.
Yeah. Do you and your wife have kids or any family in the area?
So we have 3 kids. Our oldest, she's 22, Grace, and she is in Southern California. She's trying to be a working actor. And so that's been her thing since 8th grade. And so we're super excited about that, proud of her. It's a big step, and she's going for it. And so that's really cool. And Lily is 20. She's just finished her sophomore year at Arizona Christian University, and she's studying basically worship ministry.
Okay.
And somehow those 2 girls are able to sing, play instruments, know music, have great ears, and for the notes and all that stuff. And I think they both have perfect pitch, and we're no idea where this came from. And because my wife and I are not musically inclined, and
interesting.
So but someone always said, well, obviously it's, you take baseball and volleyball and put those 2 together and you produce musicians.
Yeah. Sure.
So
recessive genes.
I guess, because no one in my family, no one in her family are musically inclined. And so we're just like, it's obviously, all God. And so that's one thing in their lives we just try to encourage. It's like, you 2 have been gifted something that was not passed down from us. Athleticism, we could say, like, hey, this God has built us this way, and then you all have received some of those genes and stuff like that. But with this, we're just like, it's not us. So, we can't say like this has just been passed down, that way. But so that's neat. And then we have a son who's 15. He's just finishing the 9th grade year.
Okay.
At Faith Christian School.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right.
So he's the last one in the house. And so we have 3 years with him before we become empty nesters.
All right.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. So.
Well, how would you describe the kind of home that you grew up in, and some key elements about it that shaped you?
So grew up with basically a single mom. I have one brother, and he's only 10 and a half months older than I am. So, what they call Irish twins. And so we were always really close. My mom was married to the person that was supposed to be our dad. He was abusive to her and all that. And so she said, I'm done. And so she divorced him. And and then we went to go live with our grandparents, her parents. And I think it was about the age of 3.5. We never saw him anymore. And so I don't remember him. I don't have any memory of him. So for me, it was just, I was like, I'd never had a dad. Because I don't remember spending any time with him. I have this one real quick memory, and I brought up to my mom not too long ago, and she's like, I don't think that ever happened. So I was like, I don't know where that came from. That's the only thing that stuck in my head for a long time. And she's like, I don't think that actually happened. And so I was like, okay, well, there we go. So then I have zero. Wow. You know, I thought I had like a 5-second, you know, kind of blip, but now it's, you know, I guess if that wasn't real, then there's nothing. So I, you know, for me, I always consider, like, I grew up without a dad, and it was our mom. And so early on, we lived with our grandparents, and then my mom worked for the Los Angeles Police Department, and so she worked in downtown LA, and as a 911 dispatcher, and then other stuff later. But she worked odd hours, and so we ended up staying there with our grandparents because there was an elementary school and junior high really close, and so we stayed there, and they basically took care of us. So we basically had 3 parents growing up. They were still our grandparents, but they also took on the role of surrogate parents, you know, because my mom, like I said, sometimes worked weird hours. And but the one thing I always tell people is that we saw our mom every day. And it's not till later we realized the sacrifices that she made, because she would get off, say, 4 a.m. She'd go take a nap, come meet us after school, be there when we come home from school, and hang out. And then she'd go to work, say, I think, for her, like 8 o'clock shift, you know, 8 to 4, whatever. And then she'd just do it all over again. And then when it changed to where she was doing days, where she'd go to work at, you know, 8 in the morning, and then she'd come over after work, hang out with us, and then she'd go home, go to sleep, and then do it all over again. So she, that's the way she did it. And she did it for years. And it's not, like I said, not till we got older that we realized, like, man, that's a lot. And then when you become parents, you realize you'll do anything for your kids, and you'll sacrifice sleep and doing other things and all that stuff. And that's what she did, you know, her whole life. And she was there pretty much every day. She was at all of our games that she could make growing up, all the sports and all of the highlights of our life and everything. And so really, even though we didn't have a dad, we didn't feel like we lost anything. Yeah. You know, because we had our mom, who was right there, and she did the role of 2 people. And then we had our grandparents, and so they're all loving and encouraging and supportive, and you know, they taught us discipline and respect and all that stuff, and we're always there for everything. So for me, I never felt any lack of love or family structure or anything like that ever. And I would even say, as I got older, that we had it better than some of the kids, you know, that I knew, as far as structure, you know, family structure goes. And you know, unfortunately in our family, you know, there was a lot of divorce and a lot of, you know, just separation and all that stuff, and my cousins and stuff, you know, going back and forth, and you know, distant cousins and all that stuff. And so there was a lot of that, you know, and so I guess we were, in a sense, somewhat unique, you know, in that way, with the friend group that I had through junior high and high school and all that stuff. But I mean, everybody knew my grandpa, because he was always there. Everybody knew my mom, because they were always there, you know, and they never missed anything. And so So growing up, it was, that was our family, but, I came out of it into, from childhood to adulthood with, knowing what it means to be loved, knowing what it means to be encouraged and supported and all that stuff.
Wow, that's great.
So there was real, true, unconditional love, and there was no real church stuff. My family being Mexican is, big, Catholic background, and so there was kind of, we went to church and did that thing, but my grandma she'd gotten sick often, and so we didn't always go, and then we just kind of stopped going and just went on like Easter or something, And
so grandma was kind of like the motivator of getting the family to church.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, she was the one. She was somewhat spiritual, but then she also had L. Ron Hubbard books,
okay,
on the shelves too and stuff.
Well, maybe she just likes science fiction.
So it's just but she, I would say that if she was anything, maybe the more spiritual person.
Okay.
So I always grew up believing God is real, but not having any relationship. And looking back with my grandparents and my mom, like they believe the same thing. God is real. They went through, confirmation and all that stuff, and but they didn't have a real relationship. They never talked about a real relationship.
Gotcha.
They just talked about God is real and we're Catholic and we're good to go, and because we did these things, and but there was now knowing what I know now, there was no real relationship. The cool thing is my mom is a Christian now, and so to see that process, has been really cool. And my grandparents are no longer with us, but so it was just, so we didn't have any real spiritual upbringing at all.
Okay.
But there was built, like I said, love and discipline, respect, and all that stuff. And so everybody they were great, solid people, and they were raising us to be, great, productive people in the community. And I think they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Just to set that foundation for us.
Yeah. How it's interesting. You mentioned kind of like your Catholic background, and there's a number of people at Red Mountain, have been for years, that come from a Catholic background, and that can certainly kind of impact your view of God. But you've got that combined with not having a father, and that's what I'd like to kind of hear about. As you look back, how do you think or suspect growing up without a dad, even though you had wonderful adults, family, caring for you, loving for you, do you think there was any element of not having a dad that in any way shaped your view of God?
No. Growing up until, I ever really learned about God, we never talked about. And so it's just, we went to church, and you hear about God, and you're like, yeah, sure, there is a God out there, but we never discussed anything. And so, it was just kind of like, be good people. Yeah. That was like how we were shaped, is just be good people and do the right things and all that stuff. And so I didn't really have any idea of like really truly who God was at all. Yeah. And I just believed, sure, he's there.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And that lasted probably through high school. But quite honestly, baseball was the thing for me. Like that was the thing that had my heart. So, I don't think at the time, God would have had a place in my heart anyways, because of baseball.
So I'm looking at my questions and kind of the timeline, and maybe we should talk about first, before you tell me, what should we talk about first? How you first heard about Jesus and how you first came to put your faith in him, or what pushed and motivated you to pursue a career in baseball? Which one of those would be coming first?
Well, the baseball one, because that's all. Since I was 5 years old, that's all I ever want to do was play baseball.
Okay.
and that came about because my mom was athletic in high school, and she would consider herself like a tomboy, and then my grandpa played baseball growing up, and he played fast pitch softball in the military and stuff, and so there was that kind of background, and so they presented it to us, and then for me, I just loved it immediately, and so when we got to play our first year of t-ball, it was like, that's it for me. Like, this is all I want to do, and I was like, I want to play on TV, I want to play in big stadiums, and I want to have a baseball card. Those were my three things.
Interesting.
And
at that age?
At that age, yeah. Because, because we could watch on TV, we're like, that's cool. And then we went to games, so then it was like, man, it'd be cool to play on TV. And then we'd go to stadium, Dodger Stadium, and it was like, man, it would be crazy to play here. And then we collected baseball cards.
Sure.
So so I was like, I want that's what I want.
I'm gonna be that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so ever since then, I was like, that's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And so because my brother and I were so close, we were playing every sport together. But when it came to baseball, I mean, we'd throw batting practice together. We'd play catch, throw ground balls, fly balls, you name it. We compete in wiffle ball and out in the front of the house and stuff. I mean, every day during the summer, for years. And so, but in my mind, I was like, I didn't really know how to do it, but I was like, that's just what I want to do. So, but baseball became the thing for me very early on, is that, that I loved and stuff and always wanted to do. So, but we were, like I said, we were introduced because our grandpa talked about baseball, and then our mom talked about her playing baseball with the boys and other sports and stuff, and they went out and played catch with us.
Yeah.
And they always they did that until we threw it too hard, basically. Our mom would be out there, and she had her fake nails and stuff, and she'd be out there throwing, and then pretty much every time, like, one of her nails would go. And so but she was always out there, kind of always showing us what she's got, and then it became to where we just threw too hard for her. And the same thing with our grandpa, is just it's just a little too much, so but we are always obviously proud of that, that we can throw it too hard for them, to not catch and all that. So, but yeah, that's how we were introduced. That's how I fell in love with it, and then and that's the thing I've always just wanted to pursue.
So when it actually came to like being old enough to really be competitive, to really pursue that career, if you were to put a rough percentage on it, how much of it would you say was pure love of the game, and how much of it would you say is TV, have a baseball card, those kinds of like almost celebrity status type things?
Yeah, I would think it was, mainly, I would say like 90% just love the game, and then the other part was, would be cool too, but, I just loved it. And that's the one thing, and that's what we tell our kids is like, when you find something that you're passionate about, that you love, no one has to tell you like, get up and go work at it and stuff like that. And so it's just kind of like, that's when that's your thing, that you love to do. And so that was the thing for me, is like, no one had to get me up early. No one had to tell me to go work on stuff. It's just, me coming up with those things on my own, or my brother and I would, say, let's go and let's go work on stuff, or let's whatever. And so that was, just purely just love for the game. And I loved it all throughout, whether it got hard or whether, had to deal with injury, all that stuff, I loved every second of it until I finished playing, and that's one of the things I guess I love about the fact that I got to have a career, is I don't remember a moment where I was like, yeah, I don't like this anymore. This is the love is gone or whatever. I don't ever remember a moment like that. I mean, I enjoyed everything, and even though it was hard, even though I was injured a couple times, and I'm pitching and my elbow hurts bad, and I'm just getting crushed, and it's just I was still like, this is after the fact. It's like that wasn't fun, but I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything, and so just that pure love is what drove me really for all of it. And then I would add with that, because I was always wanting to play, always wanted to practice, and got better and better and better. I had the opportunity to be a part of teams with other players and coaches that were just incredible, and so I've had some incredible coaches in my amateur career that really helped to, fuel that fire in me, for baseball. And that's pretty special, because not every kid is able to have coaches that help you to either love the game more or help you to, keep that fire burning that you have, for the game. Some of them actually quench that fire for them, because of they make it about themselves and how important it is to them to win and stuff like that, instead of teaching the kids and doing everything to help them, continue on. So, or love it, or get better, or whatever. And so, but I was fortunate to have some tremendous coaches and then players that have just made it fun, and then I got to play with my brother every year pretty much until I was, I think, 13, 14. Okay. So every team we played on together. And and then from after that, we played, I think, 2 years in American Legion during the summer, but he was at a different school than I was, and all that. So, through junior high through high school, I think we went to one year we went to high school together, and got to play together, but otherwise we were different schools and stuff. And so, but up at every year until we're 13 or 14, we got to play together. And so that helps too, when, you have your brother there with you.
Yeah. So as you look back and think about your spiritual journey, and we still haven't really touched on when you came to what you would say that the moment, when you really put your faith in Jesus. I'm curious about, just as you look back on your time as an MLB player, what is there anything that comes to mind that you think maybe God was doing in your life during that time? Things that he was developing in you? Had you come to faith in him at some point during your career, or was that later? Or
so I mentioned the coaches, how incredible they were. So my high school pitching coach was, I believe, the first Christian that I've ever met.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That, professing Christian. And I was like, okay, great. I mean, that's nice.
Good for you.
Yeah. It's like, all right. But the thing that he did that really stood out, I would say, is that he wasn't ashamed at all about what he believes, and the way that he cared for us and loved on us, and was there for us and wanted to see us excel, and was going to do everything he could to help us excel, was the thing that was very impressive. It was consistent, and we're great friends to this day. And so, and he's been consistent his whole life, and so for me, he was very important in my baseball career. And he was the first person that I've gone back in my brain and said, have I ever met other Christians before him, and I can't think of any time that I had met a Christian before him. So, so for me, he's the person that first was able to show me what a Christian really looks like. But like I said, baseball had my heart. So it was like, that's awesome. He's awesome. You know, I can count on, rely on, and all that stuff. And, but you know, I'm going to go play baseball.
Yeah, sure.
And, so then he helped me get to the University of Oklahoma. That's where I went to college. That's where I met my wife as well. But it was there when I first heard the gospel. And it was through Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Okay.
There was three freshmen that 4 of us hung out together. So there's 3 other freshmen on the team that I found out that they were Christians. And so I was like, wow, I obviously haven't ever met Christians my age. My pitching coach. And so, because that was the first time I really was away from home ever, I think I went on one all-star trip to Utah, I think it was. And that was it. I don't think I ever really went anywhere else. And so that was the first time I was really away from home. And so I had a lot of like, what if this doesn't work out? What am I going to do then? I don't want to do anything else but play baseball, all that stuff. And so these 3 teammates, we hung out a lot, and they didn't seem to be worried about that. They had the same passion for baseball. They had the same drive. They had the same aspirations, but they had some peace about them, And I was just like, this is different. Like, I'm all worried about this, and if it doesn't work, what am I going to do? And they didn't seem worried about it. And so I slowly found out, they're Christians, and then I started asking questions, and they filled me in, kind of like how they do things, and where that comes from and all that stuff. And I was like, man, this is really interesting because my high school pitching coach was awesome, and he would share a little bit with us, not all the time, but sometimes, but his actions reflected what they're talking about. So then it got to a point where they were like, hey, well, we go to Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They were doing that during high school. One was from California, 2 are from Oklahoma. But they went to FCA during high school. So they went there, and it's like, why don't you come with us? And I was like, okay. And so I remember going there and then really hearing the gospel for the first time. And I was just like, wow, like I'm intrigued and just kept going. And one of the players, he gave me his old Bible, and he was just like, there's highlights and underlines and notes in there. So like, if you open it up, you'll see there's some things that you may gravitate towards or really you can see what I've learned and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool. And so I opened it up. I was like, it didn't make sense a whole lot, but
sure.
But I just kept going to FCA because the one of the reasons too I went to FCA is because OU football is huge, OU basketball is huge, and then obviously baseball, OU wrestling is huge, OU gymnastics is huge. So all these big high level athletes were there at the meeting, and so this was in the spring of 1992. In the fall of spring of 1993, in the fall of 1992, it was football, and then I think basketball is still going on, and there was volleyball, women's volleyball in the fall of 92. So I'm like, we watched all of these athletes just battle it on the field, and now they're here, just singing worship songs and kind of hugging on each other, saying hello and greeting each other, and just I was like, this is really cool. So that was one of the reasons why I really enjoyed it, is because I'm like, I had that fire in me, that competitiveness, and that I didn't want to have anything, tamp that down. And so that was the first time that I realized you can be a Christian and an athlete and not be this timid, soft, weak person. Because I was like, they're not.
Yeah.
And so that was really encouraging for me, besides, hearing the gospel. Anyways, and so I just remember going to these meetings and just at a certain, after one of the meetings, just really just like, I want to have a relationship with Jesus, but I don't know how. So I remember mulling that over for like a week. Throughout the week until the next meeting, and I didn't tell anybody. I was a little embarrassed, I was like, I don't know what to do and all that stuff. So we go to the next meeting, and Keith Jackson, who was a tight end at Oklahoma, went on to play for the Packers and the Eagles, big time tight end, and he was speaking. He was a guest speaker, and at the end, I always do this. This is funny.
It's all good,
but I don't mind it. It's just it comes. I'm thinking, here it comes.
Yeah.
But he gave I was like, I don't know how to do this, and he gave his story as some encouragement, and then he just asked if does anybody want to give their life to Jesus, and so he told people, if you do, stay seated. Everybody else stand up. At the time, I was like,
that's great. Yeah.
And he's like, everybody, close your eyes and all that stuff. And so me not knowing, I was like, okay, no one's gonna see that I've stayed seated, right? And little do you know that people are just like,
they're looking peeking.
Yeah, they're just like, we see them, and so we did that, and just like, we always hear, just people don't know exactly what to say. Just he did what I think all of us have either done or heard many times, is just hey, well, if you don't know exactly what to say, how about you just kind of, I'll give you an idea and you can repeat after me and all that stuff. And so I was like, that's God saying, here's my invitation. And so that night, I gave my life to Jesus, and I felt like this huge weight had been lifted. Like all the worries and the doubts and all that stuff that I mentioned before, that those guys didn't have. I was like, all of a sudden, it was like that was gone. And so it was a really cool moment. And so after that, and I have no idea who else gave their life to Jesus that day, that night. I wish, looking back, I'm like, oh, that'd have been cool to meet other people like, oh yeah, I gave my life to Jesus that night too. But I have no idea. Anyway, so after that happened, he's like, hey, invited all of us that did, stand up and stuff. And then he prayed and everything. And then immediately after that, my friends like turned and then came over and hugged me, and I'm just like, how do they know? How do they know this? Like, you're supposed to have your eyes closed and all
cheaters.
That. Yeah, I was just like, you guys cheated, and you peaked, and so that was really neat. And one of the cool things about that is later on, I found out that there was, probably a dozen people praying specifically for me, and that was really cool to hear, because I didn't know that until, I don't know, probably 3 years ago. And so, and so from then on, it was just my desire to learn more about Jesus and understand what it means to truly, walk with Christ, and was my my aim, but I was like, I need to figure out, how do I do this with that same desire and passion for baseball, you know, and not give that up, you know. Yeah. And so I would say, you know, as a very young Christian, I you know, there was just that juggling act that I was doing, and but I had plenty of examples of guys, not only my team, but former players, other athletes that were able to you know, when it was time to play, to practice, whatever, that your intention went to that, time to, you know, prepare for all that. And then outside of that, you know, that's not all who you are, like, you know. And so is once all that stuff's over, then now you are, you know, a follower of Christ, and you know, you're living your life, you know, as such. And so you know, so that was a thing that I would say it was pretty difficult, because, you know, I didn't care about school. You know, I tried very little. You know, I tried to just get by, just so I can be eligible to play and all that stuff. And you know, but I did meet my wife Stacy, you know, while I was, the year after I became a Christian, and we started dating. And she grew up in a Christian home and had been a Christian, you know, since she was like 8 years old. And so she had kind of gotten off track, you know, throughout, you know, late in high school and maybe first couple years in college before we met. And so she had rededicated herself. She knew she got off track. And so before we met, she rededicated herself, and then we met. And so we were able actually to build up our relationship with the Lord together. And that was pretty neat for me. That was huge for me, because she knew a lot more than I did. Yeah. But how she had gotten off track, she was taking baby steps as well, you know, as like I was. And so it was really cool to walk through that with her. And I think that really brought us closer together, and then eventually say, like, you know, if this is going to work for us, you know, we have to have God at the center of our relationship. And that can't go away. That has to be there. Yeah. And so that was really neat for us to walk through that together. But yeah, so you know, during that whole time, I was just still learning, like, how do I be intense about the game, keep that passion, but not push God aside, you know, through the whole thing. And it took a couple humbling moments to realize, like, I don't have control over this whole thing. You know, like I said, I didn't really do a whole lot for school, you know, just getting by, and I got put on probation, and so I almost messed it up. And then so that was one humbling moment, and then the other one was my junior year, because I had plans to just go 3 years and get drafted, and then I'm out. And so I got to my junior year, I was one of the two main starters, and so everything was going. And then I guess I wasn't pitching well enough for them, and they sat me for like a month. I didn't dress out for games. I didn't go on road trips, nothing. And this is a year I'm supposed to get drafted. And I'm like,
oh, wow,
this may not happen. And so I was like, I may have to come back for a senior year.
Right.
You know, and so those two things really helped me understand, like, I don't ultimately have control over everything. So, and I had to say, well, I'm either going to rely fully on God or not. And so I had a decision to make, and with, you know, Stacy, and her parents and friends and stuff like that. It was just a lot of encouragement to, just trust God. And so that was a moment for me to where it was just like, a turning point. And so got my grades back up, was able to put on a uniform again and got in. And like the last month and a half of the season, I did really well. And then I ended up getting drafted in the 4th round. And then the rest is, history. And so it's just, having those humbled moments of humility allowed me to understand that, I'm not capable of controlling everything that I thought I could. And that, God is in control, and He does want the best for me. Like He's not trying to ruin my life here.
Right.
Yeah.
And so me trusting Him fully, I had to come to a point to where I was like, it doesn't mean that I'm going to make it in baseball, but and that's okay. So I had to get to that point. So that was hard to do, but because of those couple moments in my life,
those humbling moments.
The humbling moments, yeah, like it made me make a decision. And one of the most important decisions probably in my life was to just say, like, well, I'm okay if baseball is not the thing that God has for me.
Yeah.
And which the year before that had been like, no way, like that. If you asked me, like, would you be okay with that? I'd be like, no, not okay with that.
Well, like you said, from 5 years old on, that was your goal. That was your target.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge switch.
Yeah. And so when people talk, like when I share my testimony, people thought, what was a change? Like, that's the change right there. Like, it was like, baseball I was always had my heart, my complete heart. And, once I became a Christian, and learned some things about who God really is, and had some humble moments. Sorry. So once I had those moments, it became so significant for me to realize ultimately, like, how my heart has changed. So before Christ, my heart was just all about baseball myself. And, after becoming a Christian and being a follower of Jesus, my heart became about Him. And then baseball, he was able to include baseball in it, and, be able to have me still continue to do it, which, so at that time I was like, I'm always going to cherish what I get to do, and so when I got back on the field at Oklahoma, and then I got drafted, and then through the minor leagues, and I was just like, I'm always going to cherish this opportunity to do this, because it almost went away, and I didn't know how long I'd get to play, but it was like, well, it'll just take it day by day and see what happens. And next thing I know, I blink and, I'm retired with 15 and a half years of professional ball and 12 in the majors, and, being able to be an all-star and play in the World Series, and, do all these things and play with all of these people that are, some of them now in the Hall of Fame. And I'm just like, this is crazy, but those pivotal moments, I look back and see, like, well, where did God show up in my life, and it's just like, from an early age with my mom and grandparents, the way that they loved on us, with all my coaches, with my brother, with my high school coach, and then go into Oklahoma, which, by the way, the head coach was a Christian, the pitching coach was a Christian, the hitting coach was a Christian, the assistant coach is a Christian, and so I'm just like,
that's not common in professional baseball, is it?
Now maybe more in college now, but back then, it was very rare to have a staff of Christian coaches, because it's old school, it's yelling and cussing and, berating you. It's all of that stuff, and so that was very rare. Now I think it's more, more staffs
you see it
have
more
faith,
often.
In Jesus now more so than ever, I think, and so, but back then, that was very rare, and so having a Christian pitching coach that helped lead me to Oklahoma with a full of coaches, and I wasn't even a believer yet, and I didn't catch on at that time, but when I look back and see, like, man, God's hand is definitely in that led to meeting my high school pitching coach, meeting the three guys at OU, that led to me hearing the gospel, and that led to me getting saved, and all that, and then led me to my wife, and and all that, and so all of this, even though I never had a dad to model what a father-son relationship looked like, and so when I share my testimony, I'm just like, I didn't have a dad growing up, but once I understood that I had a Heavenly Father that loves me unconditionally, and that showed that through, the sacrifice on the cross and gave himself up for me, that's when I finally understood, like, I didn't have that here on earth, but I've always had that in God, and I will have that for eternity. And so the way that our whole family structure was set up wasn't something to look at as like, oh, I'm sorry about that, type thing. It was just like, it needed, the way I look at it now is like, it needed to be like that for me, in order for me to really understand who God is and how he operates and how he works and who he truly is, his nature, his character, and all that stuff. And so once I realized that was a real powerful moment for me, for my whole story, because for a few years I was just like, I got nothing as far as like, I was a good kid. Baseball went well. My family was good. I didn't have any real moment to where I was just like, I was at a low point, and then, God showed up, and because I hear all these testimonies of these people, just, man, that's powerful. Like, golly, that's, what a story, and all that. And I'm just like, my story is so boring, like,
I disagree,
and all that stuff. Well, at the time, and it wasn't until I started, realizing that, and God showed me that through other people too, because they were just like, your story's not boring. It's like, boom, this and that. And I'm just like, wow, I didn't really see that, Yeah,
it's just your story. It's just what you lived. And yet, hearing it, you really do see the Lord's hand on you, guiding and watching over you. And like you said, bringing you to just those right people where you could see God's hand on your life. And we don't often get to see God's hand like straight in the moment, but you hear that.
Yeah.
And it's undeniable.
Yeah. And I missed a lot of it at the time, which, like you're saying, it's pretty normal. But looking back, I'm just like, geez, I even remember during summer ball, I was with the team of a bunch of my high school teammates. So I wasn't on the team my brother was on. And we had a tournament in Las Vegas. And so I drove, and we played our games, and then we drove back afterwards. And after probably 2 games that day, and so we're all exhausted and all that, on a 4-lane highway, and driving. Well, I closed my eyes, fell asleep. I opened them up. I'm in the other lane, and And so I look at that and I'm just like, that could have gone horribly wrong.
Yes.
You know, because I think 3 other guys were sleeping in the car, and I was supposed to be the one that was awake. And so I look at that, I'm like, so when, you know, especially with sharing with our kids, when we realize, like, you know, how do we know God is real and exists, and how do we know God, what he's doing in this, you know, in us and around us and stuff like that. And so that's something I always point to them and tell them, just like, you know, help me explain that, you know, like that's one of those moments where you can't explain, like, you know, I mean, that it happens all the time where people fall asleep at the wheel and it ends up horribly, you know? And so I was like, looking at those moments is like, not that I'm any more special than anybody else's, but it's just that God allowed nothing to happen so that later on, you know, can you know, that was part of his plan for me, you know, that he had. And just, again, I think about all those things and just think about, man, just grateful, you know, and like, you know, and I don't say this boastfully or anything like that, but I'm just like, I don't feel like I really ever had a bad day. Like, you know, I mean, when I think about everything, the way we grew up, you know, people that I've had in my life and the things I've gotten to do and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't think I've really ended the day at just like I'm, you know, my life is terrible or anything like that. Like, I don't, it's always been like, you know, yeah, things are hard, but I've always felt like, you know, like this life is just truly a huge blessing, you know, from start to finish, or start to now, and then through the finish. And so, you know, and I think that's just neat to be able to look and say, just like, I just enjoy every day, you know. I mean, no matter if it's hard, so what? You know, I mean, you figure it out and deal with it, and, you know, and all that stuff. But in the end, overall, I'm just like, gosh, it's just, you know, having, and that only comes from having Jesus in my life. Because, like, overall, what blankets my life is the thing that allows me to say that, you know, and because I'm not so focused on every circumstance and things don't go my way and all that stuff. And, you know, and then that just, you know, I mean, I've had seasons where in baseball, because I was injured, they're really hard, and I was
sure.
But, you know, when I look back, I'm just like, it didn't bring me to a point to where I'm just like, you know, I hate life or anything like that, you know. And you know, and I try to be careful of saying that, because I know there's people that deal with real trauma, real stuff,
sure,
that, you know, that say that. And so but, you know, I try to share that with my kids, especially just to have them realize, like, you know, there were some things I didn't grow up with that they've always had, that, you know. And so if they're in that moment or season of life where they're feeling like nothing's going right, and, you know, and all that stuff, and, you know, I'd share that with them to hopefully help them understand, like, I'm not saying this so you look at mom and I like, hey, you know, here's what we did for you. It's like, no, this is, you know, we're to point them to their relationship with the Lord, and to focus on that, and, you know, and to pinpoint, like I've mentioned before, is like going back, like, you know, God showed up here and here, and I can see that here and here.
Yeah.
You know, to realize is like, so when they're in those moments, that they just won't look at it in that circumstance and say, like, this is terrible, you know, but to realize, hey, I've been through these moments before, and God has been there, you know. He's placed, whether it's us as parents or other people in their lives, to help them work through that. And so that's how I use that, you know, and not say it or use that example to boast at all. Like, like, hey, I feel this way. I don't feel that way. So, I don't understand why you're feeling that way. I don't, so I'm real careful with that because there's a lot of real hard things that people have had to deal with that, I have no idea about. And so, so I try to find ways to use it to just encourage people, and get them to understand, like, has been doing a lot of stuff, and he's still doing a lot of stuff, to take time to kind of stop and pay attention to what is he doing, in me, around me, that I can get involved with, and I can experience him more, so that'll help to bring me closer to him, so I can trust him more, and be able to believe him more, and ultimately have a stronger relationship with the Lord to and then have that reflect out to other people, that could help encourage and point others to Jesus, in that way, without having to really say anything. Sometimes, sometimes it's just like my high school pigeon coach. He didn't say a whole lot and share the gospel with us, but by the way that he reflected Christ to us, made a big impact, So it doesn't always have to be, because a lot of young people, especially, they're, like our kids, there's like, I don't want to sound like I don't know anything, or if I get challenged. And it's just like, no, I mean, if you just love on people, that could be enough, so, so that's how I try to use that, from my experience in my life.
Yeah, I'm curious about just kind of like your perspective on what the Lord has been doing in your life since stepping down from being an MLB player, and I mean, and also that transition itself, because I mean, that's a fantasy life for tons of people. It was yours before you got into it, and I would think that that type of life in that kind of career, it's easy to find, I would guess, your sense of identity, significance, your self-worth, just kind of tangled up in that. So what was it like personally and emotionally to leave that kind of sought-after, public-facing career behind?
Because of my circumstance, how everything worked out, it was fairly easy. And again, that's one of those things that that God did, that where I can look back and say, I'm truly thankful that I had reconstructive elbow surgery, because that allowed me to see what life after baseball would look like. So that's how I can say it was easy. If I didn't have that experience, I don't know.
Was that a sudden realization? Because I'm not familiar with this part of your story, and like I assume this was an injury that you needed some surgery for.
So in the major leagues, baseball had gone great for like 7 straight years, really, really well. And I signed with the Diamondbacks and for 4 years, and had a great first month. And then in May of my first year of those 4, my side started hurting. And so I pitched through it because I just signed. It was like, I don't want to go down. I just signed. And so I tried to pitch through it, made it worse, and I ended up having a stress fracture in my rib. And so I was pretty much down the rest of the year. Came back, and I was terrible. I was throwing a lot slower, and I got released, and then went to Baltimore with my old pitching coach from the Braves. And
what does release mean? What does that mean?
So they
got fired?
Yeah, basically fired. Yeah, you get fired.
Okay.
So I got fired and went to Baltimore with the pitching coach I had in Atlanta. Was there, and so they signed me, and I didn't do great right off the bat, and so they basically did like they did in college. They said, well, we're not going to have you pitch for right now. We're going to try to figure this thing out. And he saw something and figured out right away, and I started throwing really hard again. And but then I never pitched. And so
wait a minute.
Yeah.
You were throwing really hard, but so you had the ability, but they just weren't putting you in the game.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I don't, it's hard to trust someone when you're doing that bad, when you're doing that bad. And I don't know why they kept me around. That's one of those things that they didn't have to keep me around. The team was 25 games out of first place. And
all right.
I was literally the last person on the roster, I hardly pitched. And so that was the time I was like, why am I even here? And I was like, okay, well, instead of me thinking that way, I was like, okay, I'm here for a reason. Like, what is it? And so just started thinking about it that way. And then anyway, so that was my first injury. And then so then that was 2006 when I got fired and went to Baltimore. 2007 I signed with the Giants, I was with the first 5 years of my career. Same thing, the first month went great.
Right.
And then I started to feel something in my elbow and went on the injured list a couple times, came back, and then sometime, I think in August of that year, I just couldn't do it. I mean, I threw and it hurt just too bad.
Right.
I mean, I was taking a couple pain pills during the game, and it didn't, got to a point where it didn't even help, and it hurt so bad. And so I ended up having elbow surgery, and what they call Tommy John surgery. I had another procedure. I had 2 procedures in my elbow, and one of them was Tommy John, which keeps you out from pitching for over a year, a full year.
Oh, wow.
And so I was out for 13 months. And so I will say, like, during that time where I got hurt and, the teams just moved on, part of me was just like, wait a minute, like, they don't seem to care. But you quickly learn, like, it's a business, it's like, you just got to move on. So then when I got hurt with the Giants, I was better prepared for that. But, I got yelled at a couple times because of how bad I was pitching here in Arizona and Baltimore. And I didn't like that because that didn't happen before. For the previous, 7.5 years, that didn't happen at all. And so I was like, I didn't like that. And it made me focus on, I got to get back to how I used to be. So I was a little self-focused. And so once I had my elbow surgery and I was out, it ended up being a good time, for me to get back on track, and end up being a better time for our marriage, and me as a dad to our 2 girls, and so that's how I can look. At the time, it wasn't fun, but I can look back and say, like, if that didn't happen, I may have been really self-focused for a lot longer, which, it wouldn't have been fun, probably for our marriage and as me as a dad and all that stuff, because just self-focus. And so that year off from my elbow surgery allowed me and us to work through, a lot of things, and get to a point to where we were healthy again, spiritually. And at the same time, I got to see everything our kids were doing, all their little programs. And, I got to take them to school and pick them up and see what life would be like afterwards. And I was just like, this is great. I love this. And so, so once I was done, I got to play 2009. I signed, and I got to play 2009, and then a little bit in 2010, and then the the last time I got released was by the Dodgers, and I just prayed about it, and I woke up one day and I was just like, no, I'm done. And so I told my wife, I was like, if I don't get picked up by another team by noon, I was like, I'm done. And so she's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm completely sure. I was like, I just have this great peace about it. And so I really feel like I was able to just easily go into retirement because there wasn't any unknown. I knew what it would look like. I knew how it would feel. I knew what I got to do. And so you mentioned identity and all that stuff is like, yeah, there was that moment, where after I'd gotten hurt that I was like, I want to be known as a, reliable, good, trustworthy pitcher again.
Yeah.
For the team and for the fans. And so there was, I got off track there, but throughout my whole career is like I had a lot of people in my corner that we all would kind of lock arms together to stay connected and have that community so that we wouldn't go off by ourselves and forget, like what's really important here, like what our real true identity is, that baseball is great and all that stuff, and we get treated well, and it's a fantasy world. It's, it's not real life, I can tell you that. We have it really good. And so, yeah, you can easily get caught up in that. But
how did you avoid getting caught up in that, even as a follower of Jesus?
With other people, yeah, linking arms with other people. That's so huge, and I know that's huge just in general.
Yeah. Community,
but especially in that when you're, you travel on charter planes. There's food. And stuff on the planes. Once you get there, you have, you take a bus on the tarmac right at the plane. And when you get to the city, there's a bus right there at the stairs. You go check into 4 or 5-star hotels. You have your own room, and you don't handle your bags, all that stuff. You get to the ballpark, all your uniform, everything is out of your bag and hung up, and they wash everything. And you're done with stuff. You put it in this big basket, and the next day it's all done for you and hung up and everything. And then
pretty much like normal life now.
Yeah. Like I remember, I think through my whole big league career, we went through an airport, I think one time. So for 12 years
it was all
with baseball, I think we just had to go through an airport one time. Otherwise, it's just we're going through entrances that I don't think people even know about, and stuff. And after 9/11, we would get, when security really started beefing up, and because before 9/11, like there was no security for us.
Yeah.
We just got on the bus and got on the plane, but after 9/11, at the ballpark, as we're loading onto the bus, they would just have people wand us, and they check our bags and real quick, and then we're good to go. And so that's how we did it, and everybody else is standing in line at the airports and, waiting a long time to get through and all that stuff. And so, so it's not real life. And you get treated really nice. You get free meals and free stuff and, and all that. And
but it was the community that helped keep you grounded.
Yeah, so it's just, I always felt like I'm just a regular guy, that gets to do this, and like I don't want to be treated special. But during that time where I got off track, I realized like I really like being treated special. That's
sure.
That's pretty neat. And but before that, it was just like I got, I'm glad, like I did really well, but I'm glad that I didn't get to another level of notoriety and fame, whatever. So, we, in 2002, we played in the World Series, and, I pitched game 6 and we were winning 5-0 in the 7th inning, and so we should have won that game, and we would have won the World Series, and I would have gotten a lot of attention for that, as well as the other guys, of course. But I look back now, and I'm just like, I don't know if that would have been good for me if we won, because typically at that time, and still what happens is that you do something like that, you do something special. And I pitched a special game that night, that there was a chance that I would have got to do a lot of cool things. And so I was like, I don't know if that would have been good for me, And so I think that would have, made me really think more about, baseball being my identity, if some of that stuff would have happened,
Yeah, that's a great perspective.
And so, but I've, even if I felt like I was kind of on an island as a Christian on a particular team that for a particular year, we still had people here, of course my wife, but people here in Arizona that are like family to us that I could always call on and all that stuff. And so community, of people, really helped me not lose sight of really who I am and whose I am. That's something that I've heard that previous, in early my walk, and I was like, it sounded kind of cliche-ish, when you hear it, but then when you actually live through it, you're just like, it's, that's a real thing, and so just the people that I got to be with in college, in the minor leagues, and then mostly in the big leagues, not every team, but mostly, but then the people that we had here that we established our home here in Arizona in 2000. So the people that we had here, from the off seasons, from the Bible studies, from church and all that stuff, that those are the ones that, I called on a lot, to,
sure.
Because I don't not only desired that community, but I was like, I don't want to become like I see other guys. Like, I've seen so many players, like, and their wives and their families, think that they're better than other people because of what they do, and they treat people terrible. I've seen so many players treat the clubhouse staff terribly, and I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We had guys getting on the charter plane complaining that we're delayed 15 minutes, and I'm just like, what in the world is going on? So I saw that. I was like, I don't want to ever become that, and so it was really important to me to stay connected with guys, and one of my best friends, like, I remember when we first met after that first year of like really hanging out, he didn't have a phone, and I was just like, I'm going into the season. I was like, well, how am I going to talk to you, And so I bought him a phone because I was like, I have to talk to you. Like, we have to stay connected, And so I bought and paid, for a phone line from a cell phone, because I was like, I can't do this without connecting with him, And so it's just stuff like that. And so, that was it for me. And so I,
cool.
And my family didn't treat me any special either. I think if my family would have been like, oh yeah, he's our, he's special, he's VIP or whatever, I think that would maybe, I guess, boosted my ego a little bit, but they just treated me like they didn't treat me like that. It's like, he's who he is, and it's cool that he plays baseball and all that stuff, but we know who his background, so we're like, we could tell stories of stuff, to embarrass him and all that. So like, so that was huge too, because I've seen families, really put their athletes up on a pedestal, and my wife has always said, we're not made to be worshipped. you know.
It's true.
And so I was just like, yeah. So just, people for me, it's just about, you know, the community of people that I've had in my life that, keep me grounded, but also encourage me, and speak truth to me, sit me down sometimes when I've needed it, and but just have loved me, you know, like crazy. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you. I know you've shared your story in a number of different places, number of different ways, but just to give your church family a little bit of the perspective that you've picked up from a pretty unique kind of career that I'm sure a lot of people kind of wonder about. And so I appreciate just the time that you've given to kind of share all that. So thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure to do it. Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
All right, Preston. So I didn't ask you before we started talking to Russ. Are you a sports fan? I'm not connected to that kind of thing at all. But
right.
I mean, like, are you?
I am a sports fan. I follow very closely European soccer.
Okay.
And NFL, somewhat college basketball.
Okay.
Baseball, I like going to games. I don't really watch it much on TV.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those sports I'd like to get into more.
Yeah.
I just, I haven't yet.
Okay.
So, but I mean, I loosely follow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I sang the national anthem with the Phoenix Boys Choir at a Diamondbacks game way back in the day.
Well, then you went up to me.
That's the closest I come to any kind of sportsy. So what's maybe something that stood out in our time talking to Russ to you?
Yeah, I think there were a couple things, but I think the thing that I would land on is really just how the Lord guided him. Because here he is growing up in his home, no real knowledge of the Lord. He said, I'm trying to remember, it was in high school, was it, before he met his first Christian when he said that?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there. It was a long time.
Yes.
Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Which was also striking, and because I grew up in the Bible Belt, North Carolina, odd to me. Still, the fact that the Lord would guide him to meet this individual, and then for him to be then recruited to a baseball team where the entire staff were Christians, and just so that he could have that moment where he could be confronted with the reality of Jesus, and here are these other baseball players, and they're not dealing with the weight he's carrying because they've given it to the Lord, and he could see that difference. So I think just God's unseen hand guiding his life.
Yeah.
And his perspective on that being one where I don't look back on that as hard, because I think in a sense he's got that perspective of this is what brought me here and to the Lord. So I think that was the thing that there's a few things that I would ponder from this interview, but I was struck by that.
Yeah. I think in a similar vein, you mentioned him seeing something as well. I don't necessarily see that as hard. So him having a positive outlook on something that was negative, and I think another thing I noticed kind of the inverse of that, where like there were things that were common to it that were enjoyed by others, common to that career, to that life, that he was like, this is not good, and like his perspective is, actually, if
That's
we would have
true.
won that game, I don't think that would have been good for me.
That was a fascinating perspective. Actually.
Yeah, and to just see the unusual
a World Series game.
Yeah,
pinnacle.
Yeah,
the thing you would sit there and go, oh man, if only I had.
Yeah,
no, that's true.
And his attitude was, I don't think that would have been good for me, and just the unexpected form of God's graces in his story, and how he was viewing his injury, and how that like was bad for his career, like what he was experiencing physically in those two different kind of injury type situations. But so bad for his career, but that was what slowed him down to start getting a sense of, well, what is life outside of this dream career? was reminded of something that Jim Carrey said in the last few years that I found really interesting. He said something, I can't quote it exactly, but it was something along the lines of, I hope everybody has their wildest dreams come true so they can see that it won't make them happy.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that we got to hear about some of the ways that Russ discovered, that life is not what you'd expect, that some of the things that you would think would be really hard, he counts as blessings, and some of the things that you would count that you would think were like, oh, amazing, and I would totally, seeking after that, he's saying, I don't know if that's always, the best. So
looking at how those things shape you.
Yeah.
Because he talked about how certain individuals would be shaped by that.
Yeah.
That is it's a challenging perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great conversation, and that's it for this episode of the Red Mountain Community Church Podcast. A big thank you to Arian Rossi for organizing and editing the show, to Jessica Garcia and her new baby for their oversight, and to the pastors who have
Benjamin was pretty critical.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out how do I fit in some reference to the Garcia's new baby, but
there you go.
That was really rough. Anyway, you can follow Red Mountain Community Church on Instagram and Facebook, where you can also leave us comments and suggestions to help make the show better. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you don't miss out on the next episode. And if by chance you want more of me blabbing on topics relevant to Christian geeks, you can check out my personal weekly show, the Christian Geek Central Podcast. But in the meantime, I'm Peter Franson.
And I'm Preston Hancock.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on Sunday.